didn't notice the number, but I answered it anyway. And that was the worst thing I could have done. He said, if I don't go to Texas to settle this matter, he will shut down all my accounts and I will have no access to money. I felt really threatened.
Scamming people is a big business in the US right now. And according to the FTC, scammers made over $10 billion on pulling one over on people in 2023. And it's pretty crazy because there's so many different ways scammers can get money from you or your family. Pension scams, employment scams, loan scams, ID theft, immigration scam, investment scams. The list goes on. And even if you're savvy and would never be conned out of money, just ask yourself if that's the case for your loved ones, your children, your parents. Because at the end of the day, if someone scams your parents out of their money, most people would definitely have to step in and help. They are your parents after all. One of the common ways they get you is through imposter scams. And this is where scammers try to convince you to send money or provide account details by pretending to be someone you know or trust, or by pretending to be someone in authority. Now, I haven't done scam videos before, but they tried to get my mom's. So you know I gotta talk about it.
Was one day in January as I was returning from finishing my errands. I pull into my driveway, my phone rings, and I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. And that was the worst thing I could have done. The person knew my name. He knew who I was married to. He knew my address. And I said yes to all those things.
And this is how they start to establish credibility with you. They seemingly know everything about you. And of course, if they know so much, they must be legitimate, right? No. It's funny because we all joke about how Alexa and your phone and your computer are spying on you and listening to all your conversations, which they are. But we're still surprised when someone tells us our own personal information. The issue is that a lot of people theoretically know that some information is out there, but they really don't know how much people can find on them just by Googling their name. All a scammer needs is your name and the city you live in, which is information you generally voluntarily give on social media platforms. Even without running a background check on you, they can find the information like your current address and all the addresses that you've lived at in the past. They can find your current and past phone numbers, your current and past email addresses, and your current and past former employers, and any businesses that you've had as well. They can find any alias that you go by. They can also find your relatives and your neighbors and your family members and people you're associated with. And then they can find all that same information for those people as well. And I challenge you to Google your name as well. Just put in your name and your city.
And then he said, this is the U.S. Border Patrol and Protection Agency from El Paso, Texas. We have a package with your name on it with cocaine and $100,000 in it. I said to him, well, you couldn't be talking about me. I have no connection to Texas. He says, well, ma'am, you're gonna have to come to El Paso. You're gonna have to get a lawyer and prove that this package is not yours. I said, well, I'm not coming and this is not my package. Then I said, well, how do I know who I'm talking to? And he said, ma'am, do you have access to a web browser? And I said, yes. And so he said, put this web address in. I did. He told me to scroll down on the page to the leadership. And I did. And at the bottom, he says, the person's name that I pulled up, he said, well, that's me.
The other reason it's easy to fall prey to these imposter scammers is because these guys are getting very sophisticated. They'll create very official looking emails and in-depth websites to add legitimacy to themselves, making you believe they are who they say they are. Many times they'll even use official people's names and then show you the information on a real website, all the while you don't even think, hey, how do I know this person on the phone is the same person that I'm looking at in the site? I can only hear their voice. Well, it's because they know how to get into your head.
He said, well, that's me. And I had no reason to not believe him at that point. He said, that's who you're talking to. Now, I have a case number for you. You will have to come to Texas and prove to us that this package is not yours. And you will be responsible for all the expenses involved. I said, well, I've never been to Texas. I have no association in Texas. He says, ma'am, I hear what you're saying, but you're going to have to prove that this package is not yours. But I said to him, I can go to the police station and I will prove to them that this is not me. He says, ma'am, your police department has no enforcement over the U.S. Border Patrol in Texas. You're going to have to deal with us directly. Somehow we got from, I needed to go to El Paso, Texas to prove my innocence about having this package, to him asking me how much money I had to settle this. He said, if I don't go to Texas to settle this matter, he will shut down all my accounts and I will have no access to money. And in my mind, I knew how many outstanding bills I had. I knew what I needed to live. And just that matter put a fear in me that made me say I had $1,500 in my account.
Now this is where most people really should realize it's a scam, but they just don't. If CBP suspects illegal activity, they just aren't going to call you asking for money or gift cards, cryptocurrencies, or wire transfers. That's just not how it works. And this goes for other agencies as well. But by the time scammers ask you for money, they've told you a lot of information about yourselves. They've legitimized themselves by showing you a very professional website or giving you seemingly official information. They've also brought up very serious allegations that make you think you or your loved ones could be in a lot of trouble. They play off people's fears. And fear and greed, it's been said, are two primal emotions that influence human behavior and have propelled human civilization. When you're afraid, your cerebral cortex, or the area of the brain that's responsible for reasoning and judgment, becomes impaired. So if you can get someone to be afraid, you can get them to do all sorts of things, because at that point, they're no longer thinking clearly. And scammers are very good at scaring the crap out of people. If you get to the point in a conversation that someone is asking you for money or your social security number, or if they're threatening you, you should immediately think red flag.
And he said he's willing to take that. He gave me a case number and told me, all I want you to do is to go to the bank, pull this money out. Once the case was settled, once I deposited this $1,500 in the account he was going to give me, the case would be settled and I would have a receipt and reference for my records. And something rose up inside of me and I said to this man, I said, this is still America. I am willing to prove my innocence in a court of law. And I hung up. And at that point, I drove straight to my bank, spoke to a bank manager, asked him to check to see if there was any activities going on in my account. She told me no. But after I told her my story, she said, this is going on every single day. And she even told me about someone who lost $18,000 to these scammers. And it's just really hard to believe, but this is going on. It really felt real to me. I felt really threatened.
Now, luckily, my mom's too smart for these people, but even she almost got. These people are so sick and they prey off the most vulnerable population, one of them being senior citizens. Senior citizens are often tricked by impersonator scams like the one my mom dealt with, but they're also taken advantage of by fake prizes, sweepstakes, lottery scams, computer tech scams, and grandparent scams, in which the caller pretends to be a grandchild or a relative in distress. After all, what grandparent is going to let their grandbaby rot in prison? Now, even though my mom was embarrassed by this event, she was still willing to share her imposter scam story, which I appreciate. But so many don't. Some of the reasons scammers go after senior citizens is, one, because they aren't tech savvy and they're more likely to be fooled by fake websites and emails, but also because they're less likely to report suspected fraud to the proper authorities. And of course, they don't want to be reported so they don't get caught. And that's the case for a lot of people. Those who have been scammed are often just too embarrassed to tell anybody. According to a Gallup poll, less than 30% of victims report the incident to the police. So the $10 billion scam from American Americans is more like $33 billion. Now, a lot of scammers target senior citizens, but surprisingly, seniors aren't the most likely to get scammed. It's actually younger adults between the ages of 18 and 29 years old who are most likely to get taken advantage of. But this does kind of make sense because they're more comfortable with the internet and social media and handling finances and dealing with people more on the internet. So they aren't as cautious since they're so used to doing it, and because there are just more opportunities for them to slip up. It only takes one time not paying attention. Scammers also tend to take advantage of the very people who can least afford it, the poor. People making $50,000 or less are twice as likely to be scammed. So no matter who you are, young or old, rich or poor, you can be scammed. So it's very important to stay vigilant and be careful not to be taken advantage of by these scammers. Now, if you want to avoid something else that at least feels like a scam, you want to check out this video on car leases.